So it's Perek Chavov, Perek Chav Beis, Pasuk Chavov, Parshas Emor. V'daber Hashem Moshe Lemor, Shoro Chesav U'eis Ki Yivoled. Whether it's an ox, a sheep, or a goat, when it's born, V'ho Yeshivas Yom Tachsimo. For 7 days it should be with its mother. Yom Hashmini V'ho Yerotzel Korban Ishe Hashem. And only from the 8th day onward does it become qualified to be accepted as a korban, Ishel Hashem, meaning to be burnt on the fire for the sake of God. If the person goes and even consecrates an animal before it's 8 days old, it's a Torah violation. It's referred to in the Gemara as Mechusas Man. It hasn't yet reached its level of maturity that it should be qualified to be brought as a korban, so you're not even permitted to consecrate it. If you consecrate it, it's a valid consecration. And on the 8th day, it can be brought. However, if it's brought before the 8th day, it's not a valid korban because you bring it pre its maturity date before it's qualified to be the korban. So it's interesting. There's a midrash. The midrash explains, we find that a child, a male, is born, the milah is on the 8th day. Why is the milah on the 8th day? So according to one midrash, because what is it analogous to? That a person, if he wants to have an audience with the king, he has to meet the ambassador before he meets with the king. After you meet with the ambassador, now you're qualified to meet the king. Shabbos is mein olam haba. Shabbos has a semblance of the world to come, meaning the kedusha, the sanctity of Shabbos, is a semi-experience as if you're meeting God. What is olam haba? Olam haba is a relationship with being exposed to the Shekhinah out of the context of the physical world. Shabbos mein olam haba. It has a semblance of world to come. God's presence is in this world on Shabbos. And that's the basis for the Kedusha, the sanctity of Shabbos. So as a result of that, the child that lives through a Shabbos, he's sanctified with that Kedusha, which is God touch. He's touched by God. Only once he's touched by God, then he's qualified for the circumcision. Because the circumcision, as we discussed many times, when you remove the foreskin, which is a direct outgrowth and result of the evil of the Eitz Hadas, only now the child is ready to have that direct relationship, that all the channels of spirituality are available to the child. So the child has to be exposed to the Kedusha of Shabbos before he enters into the realm of the ultimate Kedusha, which is what? Which has relevance to the fulfillment of all the mitzvahs of the Torah, which is ultimately the pathway to have the relationship with God. Identically, the korban, the animal that's born, it has to live through a Shabbos. It has to be exposed to the Kedusha Shabbos, which is again, mein olam haba. It's being touched with that level of sanctity. And once it's touched by that level of sanctity, now that animal is qualified to be brought as a korban on the Mizbeach. That's why it's the 8th day, because an 8th day means it's guaranteed that animal or that child would always be touched and experience a Shabbos before he's either circumcised or before the animal is sacrificed. So even to consecrate the animal, to designate it, consecration is a designation specifically for that purpose. That itself is a Torah violation because the animal yet is not qualified to have relevance to God. But if he does consecrate, it's a valid consecration. And when it reaches its 8th day, it's qualified to be treated as a korban. But it's referred to as Mechusas Man. It hasn't yet reached its maturity to have relevance to that particular value. But the 3 species are Shor Kesef Ve'es, the ox, the sheep, and the goat. Now the question is, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu choose these 3 species? Why not other species? We'll see. The Medrash tells us that the 7 kosher species of non-domesticated animals, which are kosher, firstly, it's only a domesticated animal qualifies as a korban. Undomesticated does not qualify. And there are the 7 undomesticated species, which are kosher, but yet they don't qualify. The question is, why not? So the Midrash offers a number of reasons. That firstly, it says, if it's undomesticated, you must go into the mountains, into the forests to seek out these species. God says, I want to make it easy for you. The domesticated, they're immediately available. You're able to bring them. Another reason is the domesticated species, they're sustained through the trough of the owner. It's not a benefit from the wild. So because they're cared for and they're nourished and raised by the owner, therefore that's a species that God says should be brought, and not the animal that grows and benefits from the wild. It's not the owner, it's not domesticated, that the owner actually cares for it and sustains it and nourishes it. Okay, but that's not what I'm focusing on. But why these 3 species? The Shor Keseves. So I've mentioned this in the past, and the reason why this message is so important is because it gives us the historical background from the very beginning of creation of man until a certain point, why these people had special value. And for the reason why these people have special value, that is the same reason why God chose specifically these 3 species. And it's based on a pasuk in Koheles, a verse in Koheles. Shlomo says in Koheles, Velokim yivakesh es nirdof. Elokim desires the pursuit. He favors the pursuit. But yivakesh means he desires the pursuit. And if you are sensitive to the appellation, it doesn't say Hashem yivakesh es nirdof. It's Elokim. Elokim is always the appellation for Midas Hadin. That even the Midas Hadin desires and favors the pursuit. So let's see what application of this concept. Rav Huna b'shem Rabbi Yossi Omar, Oser HaKadosh Baruch Hu litvoa domu shel nirdofim miad rotfeim. God in the future will demand the blood of those who pursued from the pursuers. Tzaddik rodif tzaddik. If a tzaddik pursues even another tzaddik, for whatever reason, he justifies to pursue him. Elokim yivakesh es nirdof. It's the wrong thing. The tzaddik may believe in his mind that he has a right, but if he has no right, there'll be a day of reckoning. Rasha rodif Rasha. A Rasha pursues a Rasha, an evil person. Elokim yivakesh nirdof. Rasha rodif is a tzaddik. If the evil one pursues a tzaddik, Elokim yivakesh es nirdof. Hashem will seek out and avenge on behalf of the pursued. Elokim yivakesh nirdof. Elokim seeks out the pursued. B'kol mokum teda. Where do we find this? Shekain. Where do we find the application of this concept? Shrei hevel nirdaf nekayin. We only read in the Torah how that Hevel and Cain, the first 2 brothers in existence, how they have a disagreement, and Cain kills Hevel. But the Medrash is giving us background information that before that confrontation took place, Hevel was pursued by Cain. He was pursued by him. Cain was the older brother. He was pursuing his younger brother. Lekach Nemar. So we find, the Torah tells us that Cain had brought a korban and Hevel brought a korban. Cain brought a korban from where? What did he bring? It says from the dregs of the earth. He brought a flax plant seed, and Hevel had brought from the fattest of the sheep. B'chel ve'tzono. And what does Torah tell us? Vayishma Hashem el Hevel. God listened, accepted the korban of Hevel. He rejected the korban of Cain? Why did he listen and accept the korban of Hevel? Because Hevel was a nirdaf, was pursued by Cain. Noach nirdaf nedoro. Noach was given a mission to build a teva for 120 years. That should be the focal point for people to do tshuva. Noach was a world-renowned personality, but during those years, Noach was pursued. And he was threatened. As it says, they said, if we ever see you going into that ark, we will kill you, and we will destroy the ark. So Noach was pursued. Noach found special favor in the eyes of Hashem. But the generation, the world was obliterated, was destroyed, was obliterated. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Chelek explains that during the Dor HaMabul, there were people who were tzaddikim. But so why did they perish in the Mabul in the time of the Great Flood? Because at the time of Midas Adin, the attribute of justice was on the world. You can't be perfect enough to survive the scrutiny and the valuation of Midas Adin. So even tzaddikim perished. So the Gemara asks, so why did Noach survive? If Midas Adin is so exacting, why did Noach survive? So the Gemara answers and cites the pasuk, Noach motza echem b'nei Hashem. Because Noach found special favor, charm in the eyes of God. But the Gemara doesn't explain what was that chen? For what reason did he merit that special charm? The Medrash here is telling us in Parshas Emor that the reason why he found special favor in the eyes of Hashem was he was the pursued one. Because he was pursued, and Shlomo says, Elokim yivakish es nirdov, God favors the pursued. That's why he was notzachem b'nei Hashem, for that reason. Avram nirdaf b'nei Nimrod. Avram was pursued because of Nimrod. Nimrod was the king at the time of Avram. When Avram was espousing monotheism, Nimrod wanted to kill him. Initially, he was a fugitive, and eventually he was thrown into the kiln and miraculously came out. And what does it say in the Navi? Atu Hashem Elokim Esher B'charta B'Avram. You are the Elokim. Again, the Midas Adin Asher B'charta B'Avram. And that's what Tzisimu Kasdim. Why did Hashem take him out of the Kasdim, out of the kiln? Why did he merit that miracle? The reason he merited the miracle is because he was a nirdaf. And as it says in the pasuk, Atu Hashem Elokim Asher B'charta Avram. That's the Elokim who chose Avram. Yitzchak nirdaf b'nei Plishtim. Yitzchak was pursued by the Philistines. Initially, he was driven out of the community. And afterwards, they said, we see God is with you. V'yomeru re'inu. Yaakov nirdaf b'nei Esav. Yaakov was pursued by Esav. Ki Yaakov bocha lo ko. And we find afterwards it says, Yaakov, Hashem chose him. It's very interesting. You think Esav is what? Is Ish Soder. He's the man of the field. Yaakov is Yoshiv Oholim. He dedicated his life to the study of Torah. He's spiritual. Esav is a Rasha. And it says, what's the proof that Elokim Yivakish Nirdaf? So we say because Yaakov was pursued by Esav, and it says, Ki Yaakov bocha lo ko. Yaakov was chosen by God. I mean, you have to tell me because he was a nirdaf, because he was pursued. He was chosen because he's the tzaddik. Esav is the evil one, and Yaakov is the tzaddik. That's ki Yaakov bocha lo ko. That's why he was chosen by God. So I think what it's saying is more than that. Yaakov was chosen that the destiny of existence should emanate from him. There's an Orach Chaim HaKodesh at the end of Dvarim, which it shows, he explains over there, when it says, Yaakov chevel nachloso, that until Yaakov was born, or Yaakov perfected himself, the souls were tinged and tainted with the evil of the Eitz Hadas. The souls were not pure souls. The reason why Avram had a Yishmael that was an expression of the impurity of the Eitz Hadas. Yitzchak had Esau, that was an expression of what? Of the Eitz Hadas. Yaakov, he had 12 sons who were all tzaddikim. He had purged himself that the souls that were born were pure souls. And he refers to it as an elon, which was tov. It's a tree that produced only good fruit. Was still tainted by the sin of the Eitz Hadas because we're part of humanity. But in terms of the potential of being able to achieve the initial objective of creation, which is Atem Krim Odom, that only came through Yaakov. So with that, Atem was saying, Ki bochar, ki Yaakov bochar lo. Hashem chose him to be that. That he was able to achieve that level of purity, that was a gift of God. Why did Hashem gift him that? Because he was a nirdaf. Because he was pursued by Esau, therefore he was chosen and seen special by God. Yosef nirdaf ne'echov. Yosef was pursued by his brothers. Vayi Hashem is Yosef. And therefore it says Hashem was with Yosef. Moshe nirdaf ne'paro. Moshe was pursued by Paro, right? After he killed the Egyptian, he had to flee for his life. And he spent over 60 years in Midian before he returned. Moshe was chosen to be God's spokesman. And the pasuk says, Lule Moshe Bechiro. If not for the supplications of Moshe, his chosen, the Jewish people would have been destroyed. So why was Moshe the chosen of God, that he had that special standing with Hashem? Because he was nirdaf, because he was pursued by Paro. That's Elokim Nivakish nirdaf. We'd ask the question that how did Paro, was he aware that Moshe killed the Egyptian? Because Dasan Aviram had informed on him, which is something unconscionable. I mean, the only advocate the Jews have in the palace, because he was valued by Paro like a son, like a grandson, even more than that. And these two people inform on him to be killed and they ask to flee. So first, how do you inform on a fellow Jew? To be killed. Secondly, knowing his value, how do you do something which you can remove him from the palace? It just displays the evil of Dasan Aviram. When Moshe went out of Egypt, until Dasan Aviram, who were the main influences during the mutiny of Korach with Moshe, it was Dasan Aviram. Until the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, together with the community of Korach. I mean, all the events of problems were due to Dasan Aviram. When Moshe Rabbeinu came back as the Goel, he took the Jews out of Egypt. Moshe's status halachically was a king. He was a melech. Anybody who rebels against a king, the king has a right to take his life. I mean, if Korach and Dasan and Aviram were such problems, they were creating mutiny and creating a fifth column, why did Moshe destroy them? He should have taken them out, taken their lives, and he had a right to. But yet we find Moshe Rabbeinu puts up with it, and he tolerates this continuously. The question is, why? Well, he has this endless patience. But why? They're evil. They're evil people. So we explain, based on this medrash, why did he have that special value that Hashem accepted his supplication to forgive the Jews for the Chet Egel? Because he was Bechiro. Why was he Bechira? Why was he the chosen? Because he was nirdaf, because he was pursued. And why was he pursued? By Paro? Because Dasan Aviram had informed on him. So although what Dasan Aviram had done was evil, but what was the end result? The end result was that Moshe was beyond the top, and the Jewish people exist only because Moshe had that special status. As a result of his level of indebtedness to them, that's the reason why he tolerated their misbehavior and did not take them out earlier. Because they put Moshe in a position that he was a nirdaf, and since it's based on Shlomo's words, Elokimi Vakish is nirdaf, Moshe Rabbeinu was seen by God and valued to be Bechiro. That's the reason why Moshe tolerated Das Aviram all the years and all the various incidences which took place. Yisrael nirdovim ne'umas ha'olam. The Jewish people are pursued by the nations of the world. Ubecha bochar Hashem. And therefore, becha bochar Hashem. Therefore, Hashem chose you. Okay? So giving all the various instances of Elokim Yivakish Nirdaf, why these, in every one, the person was special, or Klal Yisrael special, because they were always in a position of being pursued. Afkan, Shor Nidaf, Mimneari. Why were these three species chosen? The ox is pursued by the lion. Keves Nezev. The sheep is pursued by the wolf. Eiz Neanomer. And the goat is pursued by the mountain lion. As a result of that, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo savi lefonai min harotfim, don't bring me species of the pursuers, elu min hanirdofim, only from the species which are pursued species, shor o kesev ways. This is the Midrash. Okay? Now let's understand, why does Hashem favor the pursued? What characteristic does a pursued have? I would say even Noach, although it was a time of Midas Adin, and the exactness of Midas Adin is you can't be perfect enough, and that's why at the time of the great flood, even Tzaddikim perished, but yet, and the Gemara asks, so why did Noach survive the Mabul? Why was he worthy to survive? So it says, because Noach motzachim b'nei Hashem. Noach found special charm, favor in the eyes of God. But the Gemara doesn't explain, but the Midrash says, because Noach was a nirdaf, because he was pursued by the members of his generation. So we explained in the past, what is a nirdaf? What is a person who's pursued? A person is in a position where, in a compromised position, he believes that because of his own ability, or because of people that he knows and experiences, he has the ability to evade or to deal with the problem, or to resolve the problem, or survive the problem. A person is in nirdaf, a person is pursued, he's being hounded to a point, or he's dealing with an issue where he has nowhere to turn. And he comes to a realization, due to his predicament, that he understands he has nowhere to return, where to turn to. The way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a human being, when a person comes to that level of realization, it evokes a level of clarity and understanding that only God himself can help him. So when a person comes to this level of realization, level of internalization of that reality, his attachment to Hashem is so strong, and because of that clarity and internalization, that's why God favors him. Elokim Yivakish Nirdaf. Every one of these instances. I once mentioned Emet Shalom, that David Melech says, Leiv Nishbar Nitke v'Nishbar Elokim lo sivzeh. I always mention this before Rosh Hashanah. David says, Leiv Nishbar v'Nitke, a broken heart and smattered heart, Elokim lo sivzeh. Elokim will not disgrace, will not shame. So the Shalom says that the whole concept of tshuva is midas harachmim. It's chesed, midas harachmim. As we mentioned many times, when you bring a korban, it's midas harachmim. Person does tshuva, repents, he confesses on the korban, and he has kapara, he has atonement. He's reinstated. That's midas harachmim. Midas adin, there's no place for korban. What about if a person, when he does tshuva, he's smattered and broken? He has that level of remorse that he can't live with himself. Leiv nishba v'nitke, this is the shalom. David is saying, a broken-hearted person, due to his situation, even the midas adin, Elokim lo sivzeh, even Elokim, which is the appellation midas adin, even the Elokim will not prosecute that person because he is Lev Nishba, because he's broken to such a degree. What? That's Elokim. We're saying now, Elokim Yevakish Es Nirdov. Even the Midas Adin, as we're saying by the Mabul, although it's Midas Adin, but if a person comes to realization that he has nowhere to turn, only to Hashem, and that becomes his reality at that moment, even the Midas Adin will say the person deserves to survive. That's Elokim Lo Sivzeh. The prosecution, which is the Sultan, always, even he will be silenced due to the predicament that the person has reached a level of realization, and that's why Elokim Lo Sivzeh, even the Midas Adin will not disgrace that person. And therefore, Elokim Vakshes Nirdov. So these three species, because they're Nirdofim, they're pursued species by the mountain lion, by the wolf, or by the lion, therefore Hashem says, therefore I want these species. What are these species? A human being, we say, you come to that level of realization. These are unintelligent animals. So you say, well, because it represents that concept. So what we said was, the Ramban says, when you bring a korban and you confess on the korban, what is the person's mindset? What is it supposed to be? That if not for Midas Harachmim, the attribute of mercy, I deserve to be slaughtered. I deserve that my blood should be sprinkled and my body should be burnt. But Midas Harachmim says that if you're sincere and you do tshuva, Hashem will take the animal in your place to bring about that level of reinstatement. So what is the animal? The animal is the equivalent of the person himself. That's what it is. So the person himself, when he takes on the persona of a dinirdaf, or he presents something in his place which is a pursuit, because that is the mindset, therefore it achieves that level of kapara. Because that animal represents the person himself. The Midas Harachmim says, take the animal instead of the person. We've mentioned the name of the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, that it seems to be not fair. It's not justice. Person sins. It says, the way the Orach Chaim HaKodesh asked the question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world based on mishpat. Mishpat is judgment. So if it's mishpat and the person sins, how do you take the animal in the place of the person? So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh says something phenomenal. The Gemara tells us, Ein Adam Chote El Ke Nichlas Bo Ruach Shtus. A person doesn't sin unless there's some level of temporary insanity which enters into his mind, into his emotion. He himself is slightly off. And because he's off, he's not fully functioning as that intelligent being. Therefore, that's how the sin takes place. So it comes out, a korban is only valid if you do tshuva. Person repents. That's when he leans on the animal, he confesses. When you confess, what level of, what is your status at that moment? You're the Odom. You become the human being. And you bring the animal for the action of a semi-animal. So at this point, justice, it doesn't justify taking the life of an Odom for the behavior of a semi-animal. So within the context of justice, when you do tshuva, that's why the animal is the species that when you do the various rituals, it brings about kapara for the person who brings the animal. Because Mishpat says you can't take a person's life who's an Odom for the behavior of a behemoth. So therefore you take the behemoth, the animal, for the action of a behemoth, of an animal, not the life of a Odom, which has come to the level of clarity and the proof through the confession. So these animals, which themselves are pursued, and the animal represents the person, therefore Hashem says only these species qualify because Elokim Yivakesh Es Nirdov. Meaning the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't allow, why Satan doesn't interfere. Normally Satan right away interferes, doesn't allow kapara to take place. But because these species represent that, it's the same idea as like Nishbar V'Nitker Elokim Lo Sivzeh.